This is a story about the night old Walkie came knocking. Anybody want to go snipe hunting? Asked my brother Wes. What's a snipe? Henry Thomas asked. Hey, that's a great idea, said Wayne with a knowing grin. They had located a suckerfish with the first cast, and his name was Henry. My brothers Wesley, better known as Wes, and Wayne ignored Henry's pleas completely as they continued to visit with other friends. On that chilly late October evening in 1954, they were about to begin an adventure that would begin as a harmless prank, and in the end, in an episode of the worst kind of terror. Ooh! The kind fueled by fear of the unknown. The boys, now men with grandchildren, will still flinch at the mention of the night old Walkie came knocking. As always, our house and our backyard attracted kids from all over the neighborhood. This evening was edging into the night, and the younger kids had collected their toys and gone home, with no ball left to play football. The older boys had to think of something else. That brings us back to the subject of snipe hunting. What's a snipe, you ask? Henry asked back then. Still, his question was ignored as the conversation turned towards the upcoming Halloween. To further cultivate the sucker, Henry, i.e., Wesley, started telling the old scary stories, and the others being cued with winks and covert finger pointing joined the setup. Only Henry was unaware that he had become the chosen one. Wes told about the real human arm he'd once found in an old shed behind the abandoned house 3 doors south from ours. He told the story about the Phantom Killer of Texarkana, and how our oldest brother, Jay, my dad, socked old Stoink, the cat, bam, right in the kisser. What is a snipe? Henry almost begged as he huddled near his older brother, Junior. Henry was as anxious to bring the frightful tales to an end as he was to get an answer to his question. Who asked, what's a snipe? Said Wes, even though he knew what was going on. He surveyed the group, and Brother Wayne said, not me. Junior offered the same response, as did Dan Woods, Woody McDonald, and Kenneth Robbins. All the while, Henry was screaming to get attention, still unaware of the hook in his mouth. All right, said Wesley, recognizing it was time to set the hook. Was it you, Henry? Yes, it was me. I want to know what a snipe is, said the now breathless Henry. He was breathless. Wes explained the whole process to Henry. First, he said, we go to that big field over yonder, past the pulpwood yard, said Wesley as he pointed east and away from the back of the house on Mill Street in Nashville, Arkansas. After we get there, we'll choose one lucky person to be the bag man. Now hold open a bag and shine a light into it and wait while the other hunters fan out in a circle and drive the snipes towards the light. Simple concept, right? Everybody knows that snipes will follow a light anywhere. Wesley continued. Henry, having no knowledge of the contrary, signaled his complete agreement that Wesley's description concerning the light-seeking nature of snipes was a fact. While Henry's mind worked on the image of himself being lucky enough to be chosen as the bagman, the others busied themselves with the gathering of the required snipe hunting equipment. A snipe hunt only requires three things, which are a light, a bag, and a sucker, Henry. They already had the sucker. Wesley got Daddy's big flashlight. Mom and Dad were not at home, but he would have the light back before they got home anyway, so surely it was okay to borrow it. That's what they thought. Wayne pulled a paper grocery bag out of Mama's stash by the refrigerator. Maybe you better get two, said Henry. No, said Wayne. Wayne was a conservative. We don't want to catch any more than we can carry back. I want to catch as many as I can. But that was Wayne back in the 50s. Anyway, yeah, come on, Henry, let's go get some snipes, said Dan. That's right, let's go get them, said Junior. They followed a trail they had used many times before to go fishing in Mine Creek. This time, though, they had snipe hunting instead of fishing on their minds. The field Wesley had planned to use was only about half the distance to the creek, which put them about half a mile from home. They left the backyard in a single file. Wesley was up front with the flashlight, followed by Wayne with a paper bag. Dan, Woody, Kenneth, and Junior followed in line with Henry. Henry was at the rear. Oh, that's bad. The usual mix of excitement, fearful anticipation, and nervous apprehension that always comes with Halloween was almost too much for Henry. He was not knowingly compounding this by following a bunch of older kids to an event he was totally unfamiliar with. And he was at the end of the line. Anybody knows from the Tarzan movies that the last guy in line is the one that gets a blow dart in the neck, if he is not completely swallowed by an alligator. He had already endured several tales of horror that may or may not be true. Now he was slogging through the jungle of trees and tall grass toward who knows what. He was beside himself with fear. Okay, this looks like a good spot, said Wes. The others gathered around the light from the flashlight and gave no protest to Wes's choice. Now we must choose a bagman. The guy with the hook in his mouth? Yeah. Before he could complete that thought, Henry yelled out, "Pick me! Pick me!" His only concern had to do with the description of the bagman's duties. There was something about holding a light and having a light in his hand sounded very good to him. So the bait was dropped, the sucker had taken it, and now they were going to land him. Okay, Henry, you got dibs on the bagman job. Hold this flashlight and point it into the bag, said Wes. As the paper bag passed from Wayne to Wes to Henry. All right now, Henry, the rest of us will spread out and drive the snipes to you. Got that? Wes asked. I got it, said Henry. With that, Henry was left holding the bag. As it were, while Wes and the others dispersed. They, of course, regrouped only a small distance away from Henry and could hardly contain their snickers. They agreed it was time to hightail it back to the house and see how long it would take Henry to come back as well. Not too long, as it turned out. Twist in the story. When they very noisily made their entrance through the front of the house, there on the couch waiting was Henry. Oh! As best as could be determined, Henry waited only for a short period at his post as the bagman. In a few minutes, it took the others To gather back together, Henry had propped up the bag with a stick, positioned the light inside the bag to draw in the snipes, and he left. He's a smart guy. Wes now had a dilemma. Should he go back to retrieve the flashlight now before Mom and Dad got home, or wait until morning? If he waited till morning, the batteries would be dead. Daddy would not be happy with that. Suddenly, the idea of borrowing the flashlight didn't sound so sensible. Yeah. Who wants to go back with me to get the flashlight? Asked Wes. His pleading was met with silence. Of course. None of them figured to be in trouble for a loss of the Poole's flashlight. They chose instead the safety and comfort of the Poole family living room against the dark, unknown wilderness outback. Wes and Wayne would have to go for it without the support of the others. They complained to no avail about the chicken-hearted, cowardly ways of the others. In the middle of the discussion, there came a loud knocking sound from the direction of the front door. Uh-oh. All conversation stopped. Nobody made a sound. In the 1950s, it was an unusual thing to have someone knock on your door after dark. What was that? Henry whispered to the older brother, Junior. I don't know. Maybe someone's at the door, said Junior. Hey, maybe it's old Walkie, Wayne suggested. Almost as soon as he said it, he wished he hadn't, mainly because it might be true. Most everyone was afraid of old Walkie. That was the name we had given her. We didn't know her real name. She lived several houses south of us on the same street. What made her scary, especially to young folks, was her habit of walking the streets at all hours of the night and day. If she saw you, she would approach you and ask the same question. Have you seen my son? He's coming home, you know. It was years later that we found out she was grieving for a son lost in the Korean War. A few anxious moments went by with no further noise. Gradually, the conversation increased until it came again. 3 loud knocks came from toward the front door. An attack of laryngitis suddenly gripped the entire group. Timid whispers were all they could finally offer. A controversy quickly arose concerning the origin of the sound. One camp was sure it came from the front door. The other camp was sure that it came toward the bedroom door, and therefore more to the left of the front door. Ooh. Wes was determined to settle the issue quickly. He and Wayne still had to deal with the business of retrieving the stranded flashlight. It's from the front door, I'll show you, said Wes. With that, he opened the door and, hoping to get no response, he asked, Who's there? Anybody out there? No one was there. He closed the door. Wesley remembered another possibility. Sister Wilma and husband Brooks were between pipeline jobs and were staying with us. They may be in the front bedroom. Wesley asked, Wayne, are Brooks and Wilma in the front bedroom tonight? Let's check, said Wayne. They went over to the bedroom door and opened it slowly. In the darkness, they could see an outline of 2 sleeping, snoring forms under cover of heavy quilts, seemingly oblivious to the terror being wrought upon the young people in the next room. They closed the bedroom door. Wham! Brooks, of course, had made the noise by tapping on the wall to quieten the boys. Smart guy. Didn't work, though. Their whispers had given away their concern that old Walkie might be walking about. Brooks was quick to recognize an opportunity to have some fun with the boys. He faked a snore sound that imitated what he thought to be the slumber of the dead. Wayne then, Wes, listened closely to the snores, looking for clues that he might be faking. Really? Junior pushed them aside so he could check for himself. He got right down in Brooks's face. Brooks could feel Junior's breath on his face, but still he snored on. Junior pronounced him officially asleep. They exited the bedroom quietly and closed the door. Convinced now that someone was pulling a knock and run maneuver on them, and strengthened somewhat by the knowledge of their being witnesses to the next room, the boys considered their next move. If it knocks again, we all charge the front door and jump on the knocker all together, suggested Dan. Okay, that's what we do, said Wes. We'll all get by the front door and listen really good, and just as we hear something, we'll charge the door. Everybody ready? All the heads bobbed up and down to the plan, passed unanimously. Jockeying for position became the next order of business. Wesley and Wayne were bookends, with the other five mixing in between. A position to the front of the group seemed to hold no appeal for anyone. Henry somehow wound up in front and quickly decided it was not a place befitting his current social status relative to this group. He was obviously still feeling the sting from having earlier being abandoned by the same group. He burrowed his way between Kenneth and Woody and reached the more comfortable place behind the group. With everyone in place, the waiting began. Brooks waited and listened too. One of the voices in the living room said, "Did you hear something?" Another voice answered, "No. Shut up, will you?" Brooks struck again. Knock, 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 knock. Dude, I like this guy, Brooks. He added an extra knock for good measure. In the living room, the knocks were answered with absolutely no response whatsoever. No one charged the door. No one spoke a starter word like "charge" or "get them, guys" or anything. It was official. They were scared to death, and they didn't care who knew it. They needed a new tactic. Wes, the leader, who wasn't necessarily recognized as such any longer, was out of ideas. Another strategy did surface, even though no one who first suggested it. They would attempt one more move before completely giving it to their fears and waking up Brooks and Wilma for help. Everything had to be done as a group now. As a huddled mass, they made their way to the kitchen and each helped themselves to a knife of one kind or another. Thus, armed, they returned to the living room, Wayne being known as the most agile of the group, and because he was crazy enough to believe Wes that no harm would come to him, positioned himself by the door. When the knock came again, Wayne would quickly open the door and immediately jump to safety, while the others with knives at the ready would launch the knives in the general direction of the door, thus killing or at least maiming whatever or whoever was tormenting them. Nerves frazzled, several pairs of feet silently shifted weight from one foot to the other. Dry mouths were working subconsciously to find saliva enough to support a voice to perhaps cry for help should the need arise. Sensing the tension and wanting to end the prank, Brooks banged the wall one last time. Knock, knock, knock. Wayne flung open the door, which banged heavily against the big TV sitting near the door. He was on the floor, well out of range of the shower of steel cutlery that would be headed towards the opening of the doorway. That didn't happen. The combination of the knocking on the wall, followed immediately with a loud bang of the door against the TV, sent an electric panic in the hearts of the knife-wielding defenders of the Poole family homestead. Instead of enacting a sure death by blade upon the intruder at the front door, their collective reaction was so limply launched the arsenal of steel in the opposite direction as they lost their grip in unison and let the weapons fall harmlessly and noisily to the floor behind. They were all frozen in place, each like a quarterback executing the Statue of Liberty play. Helpless and immobile, they awaited their fate, knowing the old woman they called Walkie would be climbing the front steps and coming in to get them within seconds. That's when the laughing started. Brooks could no longer contain himself, and he burst out with a crazy belly laugh that continued until it finally dwindled into wheezing and coughing. The statues of the living room began to thaw as rational thought and the recognition of having been had soaked in.